What is going on, guys, and welcome back to the channel. So today's video, we're going to be working on the GTO again. We're getting this thing pretty close to being finished and ready for the dyno to get a tune on this thing. So today we're going to be getting the battery relocated from the engine bay to the trunk. We're going to be putting it in a fully sealed battery box. If you guys are new to the channel, please think about subscribing and ringing the bell. Also, if you haven't checked out what we've done with this car so far, you can always go back and find it in the GTO playlist. We've got tons of good videos on this car and the whole build process of what we've done so far to this thing. When we got it, it was completely gutted roller, so there's lots of good videos there for you guys to check out. So let's jump right into today's video and start getting this battery moved. Alright, so we've started collecting some stuff for our battery relocation. I apologize for the mess, guys, between doing the fuel system and getting the blower on this car and everything else. It's just become quite a bit of a mess, but we'll get to cleaning it up when we get some time. So what we've got here, our studs or lugs, whatever you guys want to call these. I'm going to use these basically as a junction for power and ground. We're going to run a power wire from the trunk where the battery is going to be up to these lugs and have our ground and our power in the engine bay so that we can divvy up where we need power to go and split things off from there. You could ground the battery in the trunk to either the sheet metal or the frame or whatever you choose to use, but I personally like running a solid ground all the way to the front where we are going to split everything off from. That's just a personal choice thing. So next, we have our circuit protection here, which I went with a circuit breaker just because I like the fact if I have some sort of issue, this should flip. And then once we diagnose it and try to figure out what's going on with it, if we think we have it fixed, we can just come back, flip it shut, and we should be good to go. I went with a 250 amp breaker. Obviously, this is going to depend on what you guys are trying to run and what your amperage needs are. So just make sure you size this to whatever power draw you're going to be using and make sure you get a halfway decent one. So next we've got our wire here. We went with a 1 gauge ground wire, which is this one right here. And then we went with a 1-0 power wire here. So the power wire is a little bit heavier than our ground wire, but that should be completely fine for us. Both these wires, even the ground wire, is way bigger than what was ever on this car from the factory. And we're not adding all that much to the system, so we should be perfectly fine. So let's take a look at some of the tools we've got here. I will link all of this stuff in the description for you guys so that hopefully it can make it a little bit easier. If you're looking for some of this stuff, you can just scroll through the description and click on it, and it should bring you right to it or one very similar to it. So this here is a riv nut tool or a nutsert. Different people call them different things, but basically what it is you get an assortment of these little rivets. This one came with a whole big assortment here. And you get the different assortment. It comes with different bits for each one. Each one of these contains the bit. And what it is it's basically like a rivet. You can put this in, crimp it with the tool. It'll lock into sheet metal or thinner metal. And it gives you the ability to thread a bolt or screw or whatever you want to use into the nutsert. And it's just, in my opinion, a way cleaner, better way to mount things. You can use self-tappers and things like that or a nut and bolt. But this being visible in the engine bay, I figured we'd go this route and it'll just be a lot cleaner. So other than that, all you're really going to need are some good connectors here and a crimper of some type. You can get one that you use a hammer and it's more of like a chisel design. You put your wire and your ends here into the tool, and then you hit the chisel end with a hammer and it basically crimps it down on the wire. I have used those before. I'm not a huge fan. I personally like to use this hydraulic one. This one here is from Harbor Freight, and you have a whole bunch of different dies for different size wires. You just pump it up, it crimps it, it works perfect. I've used it many times, and it has worked flawlessly. So you can pick one of these up at Harbor Freight, super cheap, works good. So other than that, guys, you shouldn't need a whole lot. I've got a step bit here, but you can use just regular drill bits, whatever fits the nutsert that you're going to use. So let's go ahead and take a look at the car and get some things laid out and see what we're going to put where. We are waiting on a battery box. That should be here tomorrow, and when it does come in, I will make sure to show you guys and go over what we chose and what it looks like. But we don't quite need it yet, so when we get to that part of the video, I will make sure to show it to you guys. So let's head on over to the car. Alright guys, so that's kind of what I'm thinking for these lugs. Originally, I wanted to put them up on this inner fender well here, kind of tucked up out of the way. But the problem with doing that is A, I think I'm going to be mounting the catch can over here somewhere, and B, I just didn't want them there because A, the header is going to be right there, so any wires that I run to them, I'm either going to have to run down this frame rail one way or the other to keep them away from the headers. So I figure if I do it over here, it gives me a little bit more leeway. I don't have much coming from that direction except for the one main power wire, and that one I have no problem using some nice clamps to hold it down along here. And then the other issue I was having was I wanted to put these like tucked back in here more so they weren't like just boom in your face. But the problem with doing that is I need a smaller rib nut gun, and I do have a couple, but they are American versus metric, and the bolts that I picked up, little Allen heads that fit inside this hole, are obviously metric because I was planning on using my metric tool, and honestly I just don't feel like going down and getting different bolts. So I'm going to move them up here. Obviously you guys can mount these anywhere you guys want, whatever looks best to you. Alright, so we've got our first hole drilled and our rib nut in, so I'm going to go ahead and take our battery, or positive stud here, and just get this bolt started. Go ahead and make our mark and drill our second hole, and this one should be pretty much mounted. Alright guys, so we got those mounted. I'm pretty happy with them. They might not be like 1000% perfectly straight, but I did the best I could with it where it is. So we're pretty much set as far as the lugs go here. So now all we've got to do is figure out how we want to get all of our wires where they need to go. I don't know if I'm gonna have to split some of the harness, like the what do you want to call that, the loom and stuff like that, how the factory has it wrapped up here. I might have to split some of that so that I can cleanly and nicely run the wires where we need them to go. So I'm gonna go ahead and take a look at that, and I will show you guys what we come up with. Alright guys, so we got all of the connectors here on the ends of our wires that are going to go to our junction studs here. We've got them all cleaned up. I did go ahead and slide some shrink wrap on most of them. A couple of them already had it and it was in good shape, so I'm going to leave it. But this one had it, but I accidentally ripped it with a pair of pliers. Not a big deal. So we're going to throw some new stuff on that one and a bunch of the other ones like this one here, this one, and this one. Or actually, this one's going to stay the same. And then once we get all that shrink wrapped up, we can set them where they need to go and then grab our new cable and start laying it out, put an end on it, and see how exactly we want to run it. And then we can pretty much get this whole front section here buttoned up. So let's go ahead and do that, and we will get back with you guys when we are ready to run the new cable from here to the trunk. Alright guys, so we've got most of our wires hooked up here. The only ones left that we need to hook in there for are some little tiny miscellaneous things which aren't going to affect us at all. And then obviously our big power wire and ground wire that we are going to run all the way back to the trunk. So like I said, we've got everything else set up here. I think it looks pretty decent. Came out alright. It looks a lot better than having a battery up here. And one of my ideas is to take this piece here, this cover that comes factory on these cars, and it sits in here obviously a lot lower. Right now all my stuff is in the way, but it sits there a lot lower. And what I think I'm gonna do is cut this lip here and then take some black ABS plastic and follow this indent all the way up to this, and then notch out for it and go up to here maybe, and then back to this radius right here, this whatever you want to call that, the edge, and then drill a couple little holes here about that size to use either some black plastic push clips like you use to secure this, or we could even do some rivets. Not 100% sure yet, but I think that would look really good to cover a lot of this stuff, as well as we're gonna have to trim up here for the charge piping and stuff like that anyways. But I just think that that will come in very handy to try to hide some of our wiring and things like that. So now that we got all this done, we're going to head over to the bench and start putting some ends on our heavy gauge wire. Alright, now that we're over at the bench, we've got our crimping / press tool here. We've got our 0 gauge dies in it. We don't have a 1 gauge die. Not sure why. The kit, I guess, just goes 0 to 2 and then 4 and then so on. So we're going to use our 0 gauge for our power wire, and then I think we might try a 2 gauge for our ground wire. I think it'll work out just fine. So it's pretty simple here, guys. I'll show you how to do it as we go. But just a quick rundown of it is we're going to hold this up somewhere like that, then mark and cut this casing back to about here. Then this just gets slid over the end of the, which would be exposed wire at that point. And then we use our crimping tool to crush this down, and it creates a lock onto this wire here. I'm probably going to take some like heat shrink like I did on the other connectors and slide it over this once we're done and heat shrink it all up and make it just a little bit nicer. But you don't have to do that part if you don't want. So let's go ahead and set up our crimping tool and get these things put together. Alright guys, so you might have to cut the wire itself back a little bit. If you're really good at guesstimating where it needs to be. You can just cut the sheathing or the coating once, and this will butt up against the rubber. But at the same time, you want this on as far as it'll basically go. So I usually cut it back a tiny bit extra at first and make sure that this bottoms out with wire. And I'd rather have that little bit of gap of the rubber than have this not on all the way. So I'm gonna basically just leave that gap. I'm okay with it. So I'm gonna crimp this one down. We're gonna be putting a little bit of heat shrink over this anyway, so you're never gonna see it. It's never gonna be exposed, so I'm not too worried about it. So let's go ahead and get our crimping tool, and we will get this one put together. So we're gonna get this a little bit closer here. And now I'm just gonna go ahead and pump the handle. And you can see it's starting to crimp it right down on that wire. Alright, so that should be pretty good. I got a pretty hefty crimp on it there. So now we're gonna lightly start backing off on our tool here. Sometimes the dies do get a little stuck, not a big deal. We got that backed off. And now you've got yourself a nice heavy-duty connection that's not going to go anywhere. Like I said, we can take and put some heat shrink over this to cover it, and it'll be a nice, basically factory-looking end that we shouldn't ever have any problems with. So let's go ahead and shrink wrap this one and move on to the next one. Alright, so we've got these things set up here. I've got all my wires and stuff on it. I didn't tighten these nuts down yet because I might still have to take this all apart. I'm pretty happy with how the positive cable is ran. I'd like to tuck it down a little tighter or something, but then it's going to put a lot of pressure constantly on this stud, so I don't really want to do that. So this one might stay how it is, but this ground cable, I think I'm going to use one of these clamps right here and maybe move it over like that, so that it's not rubbing up against this little lip here. And then we can use a riv nut or the nutsert to hold that instead of using like a self-tapper or whatever. But once we do that, then I think I might just put these cables together like with little zip ties or something, and then run them down under the car back to the trunk that way. I just think it'll look nice and clean. So let's go ahead and get set up and get the nutserts out and put one of these on, and then we can start running it to the back. Alright guys, where we left off the other day with the battery relocation here was we got the lugs and the studs mounted and using them as a distribution block for the battery relocation. I did go ahead and get the lines ran back there and zip tied them all up nice and neat. We've still got to run them under the car to the trunk, but I think it's coming out pretty clean so far. We ended up tucking it down right back there. Not sure if you can really see it, but there's a plate that covers all those lines. Once we get those headers tightened up, we'll be able to put that plate in there and permanently mount it. I also did go ahead and throw in some of the AC lines. We were going to run it without AC, but the event we were trying to make it to got postponed, so now we're trying to get it together the proper way the first time. So we've got all those lines ran. The next thing really is to get the battery box mounted, which finally came in the other day. This is the one that we went ahead and went with. It's the Taylor cable or Taylor VERTEX there. The part number is right here. As always, I'll link this in the description, but it looks like a pretty decent unit, so let's go ahead and get it out of the box, see what it comes with, and start figuring out where we want to put this thing. Alright guys, so we've got the battery box opened up here. I've got the top off of it. It is wrapped with a clear or a white plastic just to protect it, which is perfect because if we peel this off, we'll probably end up scratching the crap out of it trying to get this thing mounted and in its location. But it seems like a pretty decently built box. I'm pretty happy with it. It's super light, which is another plus. Comes with just about everything that we're going to need to put this thing together. You've got your battery hold down. You've got the threaded rod that we're going to use not only for mounting the box, but for fastening the battery inside the box. Comes with some breather hose for the battery, and then all of your hardware that we should need. Some plastic fittings or nylon fittings for the breather, which is going to go right here, that connects to the battery, and then just their little brochure with a bunch of different products that they make. Didn't know that they made all this stuff, so I'll definitely have to check them out. And then it comes with a little instruction sheet, which usually I don't really care too much about the instructions, but it's kind of cool because it tells you some of the things that you have to do if you want the box to be NHRA approved and things like that, how it needs to be mounted, where it needs to be mounted, and things of that nature. So if you're trying to be approved for the box and how you hook it up, then I would definitely recommend looking at this. Pretty cool that they give you a little cheat sheet to make sure that you can pass tech if you need to. And then we've got the battery that was in the car. This is basically brand new. I just bought it not that long ago. I've always had this little chintzy shutoff switch on it whenever the car was going to be parked for a couple months or even a couple weeks. Or it also works great for when you're working on the car. So instead of disconnecting the battery all the time, all you got to do is flip this and everything is killed or dead, whatever you want to call it. So let's go ahead and grab this battery box, take it over to the car, and see if we can't figure out where we want to mount it. Alright guys, so while I was under here getting ready to do a couple other things, I figured I'd go ahead and show you which way we decided to run our battery cables back. So we came down through there like I had showed you we were going to do, and then we came back under our heat shield right there, and then you can see where we come back out and come forward, and then I stopped mounting them right about here for now, and then I've still got a couple more mounts to make in the back, but we are getting ready to decide where we're going to run them through the floor in the trunk, so I figured I'd go ahead and show you guys how far we got down here first. So let's go ahead and hop up there and do that. So what we're going to do now is we got some rubber grommets. We're going to give it a try. We're going to use an 1/8 inch drill bit here first to make sure that our hole is going to miss the frame rail that's right in here. And we think we're going to be good. And then we'll use a hole saw to go ahead and drill this out, put a rubber grommet in here, and hopefully run our battery cables up through here to the breaker, and then from the breaker to the battery box, and then the ground will come right up through here, along here with maybe like one of those rubber clamps, and then into the battery box to the battery. So we're going to go ahead and try to set that up and see how it works out. There you go. You got a hole. Alright guys, so I'm kind of paying the price for learning as I go here, but it's good for you guys. You can learn from my mistakes. So we had this box set up to actually be going in here like that, lengthwise, because I didn't want it to overhang here if I could help it. But after looking at it and reading the set of rules that the box comes with for like NHRA and drag racing and stuff, that way is not going to work, because our bolt holes where the threaded rod's going to go don't land on the frame, they land outside the frame. And if we're going to be doing it, I'd rather meet the rules so that if it ever needs to, it can. So by turning it sideways like this, now both of our threaded rod holes actually go straight through the frame or subframe, whatever you guys want to call it. So I think I'm going to modify a few of the things we did here, like the rubbers that I made and stuff like that. We're just going to trim them back so that it'll work going sideways like this, and then we will mark and drill our holes, hopefully, and go straight through the frame, and then do it the proper way. So I'm going to go ahead and fix some of that, and we will keep on moving. Alright guys, so what I'm doing now is I just marked our holes where the battery box lands when we turned it sideways there. And we're going to use a little 1/8 inch bit, maybe a tiny bit bigger, but we're going to try 1/8 first, just to drill one of the holes and see in there and go in there and reach in there maybe with wire or something to make sure that we are going to hit the frame. We're pretty sure after looking underneath it that we are, but we figured drill a small hole and make sure before we go drilling big enough for the threaded rod. So that's what we're going to set up to do right now, and then hopefully get this box mounted. Alright guys, so I've got the box set in here again. Right now I'm trying to decide on where I want to finalize this, because before I can make the cable that comes into here, or at least the positive cable that comes into here, I need to run the positive to this. So trying to decide on placement for the circuit breaker. I'm thinking I might move it back just an inch or two here, so the cable comes up, and then it gives me a little bit more room to make the turn right into this groove right here to go into the box. So I think I'm going to move that back about an inch or so, and then mark my holes and go ahead and drill that thing. So let's go ahead and get that finished mounted, and then we can finally mount this box and start making the final cables that we need. Alright guys, so I went ahead and bolted the breaker down. I ran the positive cable from under the car, the one that comes from the front, up to the breaker. Now we're making a cable to go from the other side of the breaker in through the battery box here. We're going to use this nice little grommet, and then onto our positive post. Then we're going to basically do the same thing with the ground, but we don't need a breaker, so we can just run that one up and then into the box here, and then put an end on it, and that'll be good to go. Only thing really left after that is we've got to put the breather for the battery on here. We've got to set that all up, which I'll show you guys that when we get there. And then other than that, we're pretty much buttoning this thing up. Alright guys, so we had the box in here as you've seen, and we are having a few little issues. I didn't want to run all of our ground wires that we need for the fuel pump, the meth kit, and the hot wire pump, or the hot wire kit for the pump and stuff like that. There would have been like 3 or 4 wires that would have had to go into the battery box. Didn't really want to fight with them through a grommet, and I definitely didn't want to drill a hole in the new battery box. So what I think I'm going to do is drill a hole right here and use like a nutsert and put a bolt in, and then cut this cable here, put an eyelet on it, ground it to the body, and then run the other end of this cable up to the battery so that it grounds right here, and then we can use this for all of our other grounds. It'll also be hidden behind the battery box, so that works out pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and drill that and get a nutsert in it, and then we can pretty much button this thing up. Alright guys, so we're finally trying to set this box in for the last time, hopefully, but what I'm running into is the washers that it comes with. Not sure if you can see it down here, but the outer part of the box, this outer side, it like slides over the bottom, and it's hitting the washers on both sides, so it's making the box want to teeter-totter kind of like that to both sides. So what I'm going to do is pull out the washers, and I'm just going to grind them real quick and throw them back in, and hopefully this thing will sit flush. Alright guys, so I ground those washers down. Now it fits nice. It's not teeter-tottering or anything like that. It's sitting nice and flush. I went and snugged these nuts down. I'm still going to snug them up again at the bottom down here. It worked out pretty good though. We got it to go right through the frame just like we wanted to. Like I said, that's why we had to turn the box sideways after all. But now it is definitely meeting the rules. It goes directly through the frame. So that's good. Now, I did go ahead and put the breather port on here. I snugged it up. All I've got to do now is hook up the PVC hose that goes to that and decide where we want to dump it out the vehicle to vent. I might end up just leaving the hose on this for now, or I might put the hose on here and then run it kind of under here. There's a grommet right here that I could put a second hole in right back there, and then run the hose out of there so that it's pretty much 100% to the rules. So now next thing that we're going to do is I'm going to get the battery, set the battery up in here. I've still got to make one more ground strap that's going to go to this bolt back here. And then other than that, really, we just got to get the grommets in place on the cables themselves to sit them properly in here. Get it hooked up to the battery, and then we'll do the battery hold down and stuff like that, and this thing will be pretty close to buttoned up. Alright guys, so this thing is getting pretty close. I'm getting pretty excited here. I couldn't help myself. I did peel the plastic protective film off of the box itself. Looks pretty sweet in that aluminum finish. I like it a lot. We didn't peel the top yet. I'm waiting until we get that on, but we did go ahead and get our cables in. I used some soap and water on the cables, especially this positive one, because it was kind of a pain to get through the grommet, but with some soap and water it worked great. I used the color coded ends here, the battery terminals, because then if someone was to jumpstart me to help me out or whatever, it'd be really hard to screw this up. I mean, I did just about everything I could to make it as blatantly obvious as possible. So that's how I did it. I'm gonna get something a little bit different here as a cover. They'll work for now. You don't even really need them because this battery is gonna be solid in here, but I threw them on there because I had them laying around. So right now I am working on getting the battery hold down in place. We've got the hold down itself on and our washers on. I'm just throwing the nuts on, and then we can tighten this thing up, and I think we're almost ready to slap the cover on this thing. So let's get this thing finished up here and get the cover on so that we can peel this plastic off. Alright guys, so now that we've got the top on the box here, we got all the plastic peeled off. I think it came out really good. I'm really happy with the placement and everything. I think the whole trunk's really coming together nicely. I think it looks pretty decent. A couple little things that I would change next time. One of those main things being the power and ground cable that I ran the whole length of the car. If I were to do this again, or looking back at it in hindsight, I would have ran the cables through the interior of the car using a grommet or bulkhead or something like that, just to keep them from being underneath the car. I think we're going to be fine. I did add some shielding and things like that. I also have circuit protection, so God forbid it does ground out, we should be protected. We also keep a fire extinguisher in all the cars at all times. God forbid something did happen. But like I said, if I were to do it again, I would run it inside the car. I hope this video could help you guys out if you're in the build stage or just in general. If it did, please think about sharing it with a family member or friend. I'd really appreciate it. Also, if you're not already, please think about subscribing and ringing the bell. It'll keep you up to date on all of the content for the GTO, the Duramax, and the Hellcat. We've got a bunch more good stuff to come, and we will catch you on the next one.